The night began quietly, almost peacefully, but there was an unexplainable tension in the air. The streets were silent, and the glow from the streetlights cast long shadows across my apartment. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling mindlessly through my phone, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling in my chest. And then it rang. Her name flashed across the screen. My stomach dropped. I knew immediately that this was not going to be a casual conversation. Her voice came through, calm, controlled, almost innocent, but the words were anything but. "You need to prove that I'm a loyal wife in front of everyone." I froze. My mind tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was joking? Maybe it was some twisted test of trust? But something in the precision of her voice told me otherwise. Every syllable, every pause, every deliberate emphasis screamed that she was serious. My heart began to race. The chill that ran down my spine told me this was more than a request. It was a command, and behind it, a trap. I thought back over the past few weeks. The late-night calls she never explained. The glances she gave when I asked simple questions. The tiny inconsistencies in her stories that I had brushed off at the time. Now, looking back, they weren't coincidences. Every single act, every small lie had been meticulously planned. And I was supposed to be the one to take the fall. My hands shook as I stood up, pacing the apartment. The fear in my chest fought with the anger boiling in my veins. How could someone I loved, someone I trusted completely, orchestrate something like this? How could she manipulate the people around us, my family, friends, everyone, to make me look like the villain in her story? Pattern interrupt. Ever felt like someone you trusted was quietly planning against you? Now imagine that feeling multiplied 10 times and suddenly it's happening in your own home. I spent the rest of the night thinking, analyzing, and replaying every conversation we'd had. It wasn't just about proving her loyalty, it was about controlling me, controlling everyone's perception, and keeping her secrets hidden at any cost. I knew I had to stay calm, but staying calm felt almost impossible. The weight of what I realized was pressing down on me, threatening to crush me from the inside. The next morning brought no relief. The house was alive with subtle tension, every movement weighted, every word measured. Relatives were already there, some sitting casually, some stiff with suspicion, but all of them subtly watching, waiting. It was as though they had been given pieces of her story, little fragments designed to confuse me, to isolate me, to make me doubt myself. She entered the room, walking as if she owned it. Her smile was calm, perfectly poised, but it didn't reach her eyes. Her eyes were sharp, calculating, almost predatory. She whispered to me just loud enough for me to hear, "You'll show them. You know what I expect." The room seemed to tighten around me. Every sound, chairs scraping, distant voices, even the ticking of the clock, felt magnified. The weight of everyone's gaze pressed into me. This wasn't just a conversation. This was a performance she was forcing me to give. Every word, every gesture, every look could be used against me. I realized in that moment that I was no longer just living in my own home, I was trapped in her carefully crafted stage and she was directing every scene. Pattern interrupt. You ever notice how people reveal their true intentions in the smallest of gestures? A glance, a hesitation, a slight smirk. Those tiny moments tell everything. I had to make a choice. I could react emotionally, give her the reaction she wanted, and allow her to control the narrative, or I could stay calm, observe, and learn everything she was trying to hide. I chose the latter. Hours passed. Conversations were tense, clipped. Every comment from her or anyone else felt like a test. I noticed subtle patterns. The way she avoided certain topics, the way her expressions flickered when she thought no one was watching, the tiny inconsistencies that didn't match the story she wanted everyone to believe. I kept my breathing steady, my face neutral, pretending to go along, while secretly piecing together the truth. Pattern interrupt. Ever been in a room where silence feels heavier than words? That's exactly how it felt. Every breath, every shuffle of a foot, every quiet sigh felt like a revelation waiting to happen. By midday I realized something incredible. Her carefully constructed image, the calm, controlled, confident facade, wasn't as flawless as she believed. Small cracks were forming. Little clues she thought she had hidden were already showing themselves. And for the first time I felt a spark of control. I wasn't powerless. I could see the pattern, the plan, the manipulation. I could anticipate her moves even when she thought I couldn't. Pattern interrupt. It's funny, isn't it? How the people who think they're in control are often the ones slipping the most. I spent the rest of the day quietly watching, observing, cataloging every small detail. Every movement she made, every word she spoke, every reaction from our relatives. All of it was building a picture I had never noticed before. The tension in the room, once paralyzing, became a source of insight. I realized I had to stay patient, because patience was the only weapon I had against her. By evening, the atmosphere was almost suffocating. Conversations were limited to polite exchanges, but the undercurrent was electric. Everyone was waiting, watching, anticipating the next move, even if they didn't know what it would be. I felt a mixture of fear, adrenaline, and determination swirling inside me. I knew I had to stay calm, keep observing, and never give her the satisfaction of seeing me shaken. Pattern interrupt. Ever notice how in moments of extreme pressure, your mind suddenly sees things you've been missing for weeks? That's exactly what happened to me. By the time night came, I had started connecting the dots. The small slips, the inconsistencies, the moments she thought I wasn't paying attention, they all formed a bigger picture. She had tried to manipulate me, to control how everyone saw me, to force me into a performance. But unknowingly she was revealing herself, piece by piece. I sat back on the couch, heart racing, mind alert, knowing that I had survived the first wave of her manipulation. I hadn't reacted the way she wanted. I had stayed calm, collected, and observant. And though the battle was far from over, I felt something powerful: clarity, awareness, insight. And that night, I realized something important. Sometimes, the ones who try to control the story are the ones who leave the most evidence behind. The morning sun spilled into the living room, but it did nothing to warm the atmosphere. Every corner of the house felt heavy, tense, as if the walls themselves were watching. I could see her sitting there, calm on the surface, but every inch of her body screamed calculation. She had done this before, or at least she thought she had. Every move was deliberate, every glance designed to unsettle me. I took a seat across from her, pretending to be composed, but inside, my mind was racing. I noticed the way she subtly leaned towards certain relatives when she spoke, whispering things with just enough tone to plant suspicion without anyone noticing. I realized she was trying to isolate me, to make everyone believe I was the problem, the liar, the one hiding something. Pattern interrupt. Ever been in a room where everyone seems normal but you know something is off? Like the air itself is thick with secrets? That's exactly how it felt. She looked at me, smiled faintly, and whispered, "Remember, they need to see the truth, your truth, my truth, make it convincing." I clenched my fists under the table, trying to control my anger and my fear. Her words weren't just instructions. They were a challenge, a dare. As the relatives began arriving, the tension multiplied. Cousins, aunts, uncles, even neighbors, everyone seemed eager to witness this test she had concocted. She wanted me to perform, to act out her narrative. But the truth was slipping through the cracks, and I could sense it. Some of the relatives were already noticing subtle inconsistencies. Their eyes shifted when they thought no one was looking, their expressions flickered between doubt and curiosity. Pattern interrupt. Have you ever noticed how some people can't hide their doubt? It's in the eyes, the posture, the tiny twitch of a lip. Yeah. I started seeing it everywhere that day. She began subtly questioning me in front of everyone, framing it as casual conversation. "Do you really remember what happened that night?" Or, "Are you sure you're being honest?" Each question was meant to make me stumble, to make me doubt myself. But I stayed calm, choosing my words carefully, keeping my face neutral. I realized that every reaction I gave was ammunition for her, so I gave nothing. Then came the first real confrontation. She accused me openly of hiding something, details about a recent financial decision she had made. The words hit me like ice. She had tried to frame me for decisions I hadn't even been involved in. The room went quiet. Eyes darted between us, curious, confused, waiting for a reaction. I kept my voice calm, almost eerily calm, and replied, "I had no idea this was happening. Can you explain it to everyone?" Pattern interrupt. Ever noticed how staying calm makes people doubt themselves more than yelling ever could? Yeah, it works every time. Her carefully constructed confidence began to crack ever so slightly. She hesitated, blinked, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of panic in her eyes. My relatives noticed it too. Some exchanged glances, subtle nods, small gestures that told me they were starting to question her story. The balance of power was shifting, and it was happening slowly, almost imperceptibly. Then I spotted it, a note, a tiny slip of paper she hadn't noticed fall near her bag. My heart raced. It was small, almost meaningless to her, but to me it was proof. Proof of her planning, her manipulation, her lies. My mind raced as I realized that she had left a trail, a breadcrumb path that could unravel everything. Pattern interrupt. Ever find a tiny piece of evidence and suddenly the whole puzzle starts making sense? That's exactly what happened. I kept my composure, making no sudden moves. But inside, adrenaline and fear collided with a growing sense of power. I knew that I had to wait for the right moment to use it. Patience was my ally. Observing, understanding, and carefully noting every detail, this was my only way to survive her game. Hours passed like this, a tense battle of wits and subtle manipulations. Her questions, her nudges, her whispers, everything was designed to make me falter. But I stayed calm, methodical, and aware. Every subtle glance, every whispered suggestion, every reaction of the relatives was being catalogued in my mind. By late afternoon, her carefully staged performance was starting to crumble. Small hints of her true motives were slipping through. The way she avoided certain topics, the nervous flicker when she thought no one was watching, the slight tension in her voice. And my relatives, who had been silent observers, began exchanging glances of doubt, a tiny spark of realization lighting up their faces. Pattern interrupt. Ever notice how the tiniest slip can change everything in a room? One word, one look, one hesitation, and suddenly nothing is as it seems. And just like that, the first cracks in her plan became visible to everyone. I stayed composed, watching, calculating, feeling a quiet but growing sense of control. She had forced me into her game, tried to manipulate me, tried to make me the story, but now, unknowingly, she was starting to reveal herself to everyone in the room. The tension was electric, the air thick with anticipation. Every smile, every glance, every word carried weight. It was clear that the house was no longer hers alone. Her web of manipulation was showing gaps, and slowly the truth was creeping forward. Subtle, yet undeniable. Pattern interrupt. Ever realize that sometimes the people who try to control the story are the ones leaving the most evidence behind? That's exactly what was happening in that room. By the time the evening came, the atmosphere was tense but different. The energy had shifted. Her control, once absolute, was faltering. I had stayed calm, had observed, had noticed everything, and the room was beginning to sense it too. The first stage of the test she had forced me into was over, but the real game, the exposure of secrets, the unraveling of lies, the silent judgments of everyone in the room, was just beginning. By late evening, the atmosphere in the house had shifted. The tension that had been simmering all day wasn't just uncomfortable, it was almost tangible. Every movement, every glance, every whisper carried weight. My wife's calm, confident facade, the one she had maintained for weeks, was starting to crack, and I could feel it in every corner of the room. She was sitting there, still smiling, but the calculation in her eyes flickered, revealing doubt. I noticed the subtle tremor in her hands, the way her fingers fidgeted with the edge of her glass, the slight stiffness in her posture. Little things, almost invisible to anyone not paying attention, but I had been observing her all day. Every gesture, every reaction, every word was catalogued in my mind. Pattern interrupt. Ever noticed how the most controlled people often reveal their secrets in the tiniest gestures? One twitch of a finger, one faltering smile, and suddenly the mask cracks. Then I saw it, the first undeniable slip. A small envelope she had left carelessly on the counter, just barely hidden behind her purse. My pulse raced as I realized what it contained: receipts, messages, notes, and evidence of everything she had tried to hide. This wasn't just manipulation anymore. It was an elaborate scheme designed to force me into performing her story while she remained untouchable. But in her overconfidence, she had left a trail that I could follow. I stayed calm. I didn't move immediately. I waited, observing her reactions. The longer I waited, the more she revealed. She was beginning to talk to our relatives, trying to frame me in small ways, planting tiny seeds of doubt. "Are you sure you understand what happened?" she asked innocently, a faint smile on her lips. "Do you really remember what was said that night?" Pattern interrupt. Ever had someone try to trap you with words, but staying calm makes them doubt themselves instead? That's exactly what was happening. I answered carefully, choosing my words deliberately, keeping my tone calm, neutral, almost unnervingly so. Each phrase I spoke highlighted subtle inconsistencies in her story without directly accusing her. Every word I said, every fact I presented, made her smile falter for a split second. And I noticed it, the first tiny crack in the armor she had built so carefully over weeks. The relatives, who had been silent observers all day, were now reacting. Their expressions shifted from casual curiosity to suspicion, and finally to subtle disbelief. Some exchanged small, almost imperceptible glances with one another, their faces reflecting confusion and dawning realization. They were noticing the inconsistencies, and I could see the moment when doubt began to creep in. Then came a second slip. She reached for her phone but did so hastily, knocking over a small decorative item. In the chaos, the envelope tumbled fully onto the table. It spilled open, revealing the receipts, messages, and notes she had been so careful to hide. Gasps echoed around the room. My heart pounded, not from fear but from the realization that the truth was finally emerging in plain sight. Pattern interrupt. Ever seen someone try to fight the truth when the evidence is staring them in the face? Fascinating and satisfying. Everyone in the room leaned in, curious, anxious, trying to understand what had just happened. My relatives began whispering to one another, pointing out the inconsistencies they had noticed earlier. Their faces were a mixture of shock, disbelief, and growing understanding. The balance of power was shifting, and it was happening visibly. My wife's smile wavered, her words stumbling as she tried to explain herself. She attempted to redirect attention, to cast doubt back onto me, to frame me as the one hiding something, but it was too late. The evidence was right there in front of everyone. Receipts proving secret transactions, messages revealing hidden intentions, notes detailing lies and manipulations. The truth had become undeniable. Pattern interrupt. Ever notice how people's confidence evaporates the moment their lies are exposed? It's almost poetic. I kept calm, letting the truth speak for itself. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't yell, I didn't demand attention. I simply let the evidence and my careful words do the work. The relatives began asking questions, probing the inconsistencies she couldn't explain. One cousin, who had remained quiet all day, finally spoke up. "Wait, this message doesn't match what she just said. Can someone explain this?" Her eyes widened. Her hands trembled slightly. The room became charged with tension. It was as if time had slowed. I could see her realizing that the careful narrative she had crafted for weeks was collapsing. Every move she had made to control perception, to manipulate everyone into believing her story, was unraveling. Pattern interrupt. Ever watch someone realize the walls they built to control others are collapsing around them? It's slow, terrifying, and a little satisfying. Hours passed like this, a silent battle of observation and subtle confrontations. She tried again, attempting to redirect the narrative, attempting to regain control. But each time, another detail, another slip, another inconsistency came to light. My relatives were no longer passive. They asked questions, compared notes, connected dots. The power dynamic had shifted completely. By nightfall, the house felt transformed. What had started as a tense test she had forced me into had become a full revelation. Her carefully constructed image of control was broken. The room was alive with realization, shock, and slowly understanding. Every secret she had tried to hide was now visible to everyone, and every lie she had told was slowly coming apart. Pattern interrupt. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't fight, isn't yell, it's watch, notice, and let the truth speak for itself. By the end of the night, the shift was undeniable. Her attempt to manipulate, to control, to force me into a performance had failed. And while she still sat there, trying to maintain composure, the cracks in her facade were visible to everyone. Faces that had been neutral or suspicious were now reflecting understanding, realization, and, for some, respect for the calmness and patience I had maintained throughout. For the first time all day, I allowed myself to breathe. I hadn't won through confrontation or anger, but through observation, patience, and allowing the truth to reveal itself naturally. And I knew that this night, this painstakingly observed unraveling of deception, had changed everything. The story was no longer hers to control. By the time night fully settled in, the atmosphere in the house had transformed completely. What had started as tension and suspicion had now turned into clarity and judgment. My wife's careful facade, the one she had maintained so flawlessly for weeks, was shattered. Every secret she had tried to hide, every lie she had told, every manipulation she had attempted was now visible to everyone. The power she had tried to wield over me had crumbled. I sat calmly watching the room. The relatives who had been unsure and hesitant all day were now speaking openly. Some asked questions directly, some whispered to one another, and a few gave subtle nods or exchanged glances that spoke volumes. Everyone was processing the truth, and slowly the realization spread. Her carefully constructed story had failed. Pattern interrupt. Ever notice how when the truth finally comes out, it hits harder than any argument ever could? That's exactly what was happening in the room. She tried again to regain control, but it was too late. Every move she made, every word she spoke, only drew more attention to the inconsistencies in her story. Her voice wavered slightly, a subtle tremor betraying the calm she tried to maintain. She attempted to redirect blame, to twist facts, to make me look guilty, but the evidence was irrefutable. Receipts, messages, notes, small slips she had left exposed the reality of her actions. I could see it in her eyes. The mask of control she had worn so carefully was gone. Her attempts at persuasion were weak, almost desperate. And in that moment I realized something crucial. She had underestimated me. She had tried to force me into proving her loyalty, into performing her narrative, but she had left the pieces I needed to expose her. Patience, observation, and clarity had turned the tables entirely. The relatives started questioning her directly. Why didn't you tell us the full story? Why these messages say something different than what you told us? Why were the receipts hidden? Each question chipped away at the narrative she had tried so hard to control. I watched as disbelief, confusion, and then slow understanding spread across their faces. Pattern interrupt. Ever notice how people reveal themselves most clearly when everyone is watching? Yeah, it's brutal and beautiful at the same time. Finally, she slumped slightly in her chair, realizing that the room had turned against her without a single dramatic confrontation. The truth had spoken louder than any shouting, any pleading, or any manipulation. She had forced me into proving her loyalty, but in doing so, she had shown her own disloyalty, to me, to herself, and to everyone watching. I spoke calmly, carefully, letting the words fall naturally, without anger but with precision. I pointed out the inconsistencies, explained the evidence, and highlighted the manipulation. My voice was steady, composed, almost quiet, but it carried power. Power of truth. Power of patience. Power of observation. The relatives listened, nodding subtly, connecting the dots themselves. Their faces reflected a growing sense of understanding and, for some, respect for how I had handled the situation. Pattern interrupt. Sometimes the quietest voice in the room ends up speaking the loudest truth. By the end of the night, the outcome was undeniable. Her manipulation had failed, her lies were exposed, and the room had shifted completely. The tension that had dominated the day transformed into clarity. Relatives who had once been hesitant now understood the truth. My wife sat there, quiet, defeated, not with anger but with the realization that control was no longer hers. I leaned back, letting the calm settle in. I hadn't won through confrontation, yelling, or rage. I had won by staying calm, observing, and letting the truth reveal itself naturally. The lesson was clear. Manipulation only works when you react to it. Fear only has power when you feed it. Patience, awareness, and clarity, these were the tools that had given me control over a situation designed to destroy me. Pattern interrupt. Ever notice how the truth has a way of showing up at exactly the right time, even when it seems impossible? Yeah, that's what happened. As the relatives began to leave, I could feel a quiet sense of relief and vindication. The house was no longer a stage for her manipulations. The web of lies she had woven was dismantled piece by piece, naturally, calmly, without chaos or shouting. And though she still sat there, attempting to maintain composure, everyone could see the cracks, the dishonesty, the truth. And as the night ended, I realized one final thing. Sometimes the best revenge isn't shouting, confrontation, or chaos. It's patience, observation, and letting the truth do the work for you. If you enjoyed this story of truth, patience, and revelations, don't stop here. Click the next video on my channel Lovescape to discover the power of compounding. A story that will change the way you see life, growth, and success forever.